Okay, we are recording. Welcome everybody to the latest Baseline Protocol Steering Committee meeting. This is the SSC. And this is the group that takes a look at the roadmap ahead and prioritizes what we're going to shine spotlights on, make sparkly, shiny objects. This is Memorial Day in the US. Happy Memorial Day, everyone, and thanks to all service people everywhere. Here and abroad, and we will probably have a smaller group today because of that, especially given that not only is this Memorial Day, but it looks like it's an opening up day for a lot of folks, at least here in the US. I'm not sure about elsewhere. So so a lot of people may be out with their families trying to get some sunshine. So with that, but we decided not to move the meeting because it's just it's a big group now, and moving it would have been quite a feat. And not everybody's here in the US, so we wanted to respect that as well. So with that, we can begin the event. Does anyone have anything new to add to the agenda? I'll go through the agenda very quickly right now. We'll go through any new members. I don't think I'm seeing any new folks on the call right now. But if you see yourself and you're new, please identify yourself.
Well, John, this is my first time at, I think, this particular meeting. I was at the TSC, which is different than the SSC.
Yeah, Brantley, why don't you say hi, just very quickly.
Hey everybody, Brantley Milligan. I'm Director of Operations at the Ethereum Name Service.
Which is very exciting to have you here. And then I see Christian as well. And I'd like to say, first of all, before anybody else gets going here, let me make an announcement. And we'll put this in the front of all meetings going forward. Any meeting that gets put onto YouTube, please be advised that we will be putting this on YouTube. And anybody that has a concern about that should drop or let us know right now so that we can consider otherwise. By the way, that is an agenda item, is whether or not this particular meeting should be put on public YouTube. It's everything is transparent in the community. But it may be that we have some meetings that are not necessarily just ramped right to YouTube every time. So that was a suggestion that was made. I don't know that I have a point of view about it right now, but it's probably worth discussing. And the general statement that I have put now in here is that people listed here or appearing on community videos or in the GitHub repos should be assumed to be representing themselves and not necessarily the companies they work for. So does anyone have any comments before we move on from there?
John, just a quick question. Do you think that having this be posted, is it in some way making people not want to participate? I'm just curious, like how major of an issue this is.
Well, I think we want to make sure that people feel safe, showing up in work for the Baseline Protocol, and we are working very hard and I think very effectively to end the era where corporations are like, "What? You're working on mainnet? You can't do that," and getting people in trouble. I think that's coming to an end, but there's still companies that might be a little bit concerned about that and might not want to see their employees show up in things that are overtly working on mainnet type things. Although, to be clear, Baseline Protocol doesn't, it works regardless of, the technique works regardless of whether you're using the mainnet or not. So, but it's been a concern, especially because we've become so quickly popular. I mean, there's so many people paying attention that, at least a couple people I've talked to have been like, I really, I'm not ready for my company to be, front and center on this yet, right? So a lot of people that are getting lined up all the way up to the CEO, big companies. But as an individual in a company, just like back in the 90s with the Java community, there were thousands of IBMers, I remember, that were involved with Java before IBM said anything about it officially. So you want to feel safe being an individual in a company, being involved in the community without making a statement about what your company's intentions are. So that's our effort at that. I hope everybody thinks that's okay. But we can also improve it.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, comments? Okay, anybody else wants we got Lee here, I see.
Yeah, hey, John, this is Lee Reiners. I'm from Duke University Law School. Jimmy invited me to participate, but I teach the legal and policy issues associated with cryptocurrency and blockchain applications here.
Oh, Duke is so good at that. I taught a class over there with one of your colleagues. It's great to have you here. And also Jimmy Lentz is here from the engineering department, right?
Yeah, from the engineering school. We are very involved. Fortunately, we've had you talk to classes. You'll be doing hopefully more of that in the coming year. But yeah, we are actively pursuing a number of different areas of blockchain, and actually run two blockchains in the engineering school, two full nodes. Well,
as you know, there's now you have an army of people that can help.
Yeah.
In fact, take a look at folks like Brantley here. So who else? I think everybody else. We got Charlie Morris. So I'll bring up one other point here, and that is that we have we've started to kind of informally or formally have people stepping up to kind of czar things. That is, so for example, Kyle. Has been Kyle Ellicott has been kind of stepping up to be our czar of events, and he's going to be helping us with an event, or he's going to be leading our effort on an event next month, Tuesday on the 2nd. It's called Mainnet.events. It's run by Masari, and we got invited to put 2.5 hours of content into that event. And Kyle's organizing that right now quite effectively, and Avia has been involved and several others. So that's exciting. And so I want to announce that Kyle's doing that. Charlie Morris is sort of the czar of making business safe for Mainnet. And as we discussed, Charlie, I'm sure you want to make the point. Being a czar of it means you're accountable. Doesn't mean you're doing the work or all the work, right? You're just making sure that we stay on target, and that the agenda doesn't disappear from our list of priorities, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. Hi, John, how you doing? Yeah, and in particular, there's a lot of ideas that I think, a few people you've had and I've had where, we need other people to step up and help us, whether it's a big company that could, write a blog post and publicly support us, or even just general people who are maybe organizing conferences and can kind of have us in a slot. I think there are, lots of things, lots of opportunities there.
Thank you, Charlie. And I thought I had it up, but Medium, there it is. I'll bring that up real quick. So if anybody hasn't seen this story, it'd be great if we could if we could trumpet this. It's got some really key quotes that would like to really make a thing, right, Charlie?
Yeah.
We permit our employees to consider uses of the mainnet and public blockchain networks. We contribute and adhere to strict standards of appropriate use and security so that we can confidently employ the mainnet in production when it is the right tool for the job. Seems like a common sense statement. And does anyone want to comment on that?
John, the only thing I would say, and it's not really a comment on that particularly, but in particular around the notions of security and some of the things that are going to be important to all users, but some users more than others. To the extent that we can, anyone who is interested in leveraging kind of an academic study or an academic approach to, going beyond the statement, but actually proving that, we would be more than open to talking to folks. We're always looking for different kinds of experiments. And so within the school, and by the way, Lee and I both are working with just graduate students in our respective, obviously he's in the law school, I'm in the engineering school, but to the extent that we could, do something like that, and in particular around the area of security, because that is something that's very popular. People want to know more about it, but actually putting some numbers kind of behind that, we would be more than happy to entertain, any sort of experiments or anything along those lines that we can do, with the students within kind of an academic environment.
That'd be awesome. Right. So that's and we also have Jack Wiring, of course, who's on the call, and he's sort of the czar for communications. He works with a variety of people, including Masish, who's been such a great person for doing videos. Avia, by the way, is doing a really cool video, kind of a high quality, high gloss video. So that's, wanted to announce that. And there would be, people just need to step up and say, hey, we need a czar for ERP, we need a czar for et cetera, et cetera. And all that means is, again, that you're just sort of coordinating people, making sure that things get done. Okay, so I've mentioned the Mainnet event next week. It's at mainnet.events. And I've mentioned the leaderboard listing and announced participation. Yeah, policy. Okay, so all the housekeeping is done. Can move on to the fun stuff. Let's review our accomplishments. Clearly, last week was a big week. If anybody that's not aware, we announced and broke a little piece of the internet again, that we have a SAP Microsoft Dynamics integration demo online. It's up, it's running, people are using it, people are excited, got covered. And the only thing that we probably want to, we'll do better next time is a lot of, but it's an indication of success. It's a lot of reporters called and said, hey, why didn't you let us know about this beforehand? So that was good, because several of them said, one of them in particular said, this is major. I need more time to write a big story about this next time. So that's good. Anyone want to say a few words about that? I'm looking to see if anybody's online from the team that did it. No. Okay. So congratulations to Envision Blockchain, Unibright, Provide, and of course SAP and Microsoft. And also following from that are a number of projects that are coming out in the next few weeks. One of them is with LimeChain. We'll be announcing a very similar thing, where we do what we did with SAP and Dynamics, but now also with a spreadsheet. So with Google Spreadsheets, and I know that York Rhodes, who's on this committee, is looking at getting Excel into that demo as well. So imagine, as is often the joke, a lot of companies' ERP system is a spreadsheet. So wouldn't it be nice if you can baseline a spreadsheet row? So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. And then again, Provide. So Provide's 3 for 3. They're involved in another project that will come after that, involving legal identity, or not legal identity, sorry, legal contracts. So DocuSign integration, which I think is pretty exciting as well. those are the immediate demos that are coming up. Are there any others that people are aware of?
Nothing that I'm aware of.
Okay, all right. Spreadsheets, tracking. Okay, so let's talk about roadmap. This is part of the show where we talk about the upcoming roadmap. And in particular, if you remember, for those of you who were on the call last time, we got to several things that people wanted to prioritize. EDI, John Marnock in particular, and there's several companies that really know something about, know a few things about EDI. And so creating an EDI kit that would be something that would allow any other, any integrations, any workflow steps to conduct those workflow steps with EDI compliance, using EDI codes, and extending EDI from what it's traditionally been based on, which is bilateral document, electronic document coding to multilateral workflows. So that was the first one. The second is multi-part, another one was tracking identity of suppliers. Everest was particularly focused on that. Yep. And then some folks have been saying that they'd love to see an Oracle demo along the same lines as the SAP and Dynamics demo. Hopeful of that. And then another idea was Wix, Weebly, and other kinds of things, which I'm going to extend to say also middleware, right? That is like Dell Boomi, for example, would be in there as an integration. So these are these were the things that were discussed, and now what we have to do is determine what the list of things that we want to, what is the number one thing that we want to make, sort of like the SAP Dynamics demo was a unifying experience for a lot of people. What's the next one? What's the big, gravity well that brings a lot of these things together? So multi-party workflow steps, being able to quickly create a new workflow step. These are the issues. So, and I decided I'd try to write these all down in something a little simpler than, GitHub repo issues, just so that we can take a look at them all, get them on the record. So I'd like to go through these, and if people can, I tend to talk pretty quick sometimes, and I don't leave a lot of pauses, so people feel free to, it's not a huge group today, so feel free to just jump in and stop me from speaking, and we can talk about any one of these. So in terms of optimizations, gas costs for workflow deployment is an optimization that we need to look at, that the engineering team is looking at. Batching work steps to save cost without causing race condition issues or holding up subsequent work steps. That'll reduce gas cost and can also increase the obfuscation of what's going on chain. A universal org registry. Kyle brought this up, that maybe we want to go from every work group that is, and it's a one-to-one relationship, work group to workflow. So if you have a new workflow, you have a new work group. And the conjecture is, hey, what if that's not the optimal cardinality? What if there was an org registry that was more universal? What if work groups could have multiple workflows? There are some questions there. So that's some pretty interesting work that could be done. And then I used sort of an old IBM thing called a hill structure for this. So can do something, usually it's how, what, how, and wow, right? So I didn't put the wow in here for most of these, but I like to, a good user story is so-and-so needs or wants X so that they can Y. Another way to do this is, you can do this now. Now you can do this. Now you can do this. I like that for road mapping because you can say, well, I can do this, but that relies on these things to do first. And so you can kind of build up this progression. So in order to, and this seems to be the one that everybody's talking about, being able to go from the POs step to the invoice step and then tokenizing that invoice. Any thoughts on this? That could be the next big sparkler, the next big sort of unifying thing.
John, is the notion, and you and I talked about this a little bit, it's Jimmy, but you and I talked about this a little bit. With regard to tokenizing the invoices, was there or is there a notion included in this around creating a marketplace, not simply tokenizing an invoice on a one-to-one type relationship, but actually creating a marketplace, a competitive marketplace that would be available to, basically finance these via the tokens?
Yes, so I'm going to add that explicitly.
There is now.
Yep, can create a marketplace. That doesn't, and this is the interesting thing, right? That doesn't give away the business information, or business information.
Yeah, the business identifying information.
Yeah. Of invoicers, right? Of those selling short-term debt, effectively.
Right.
In other words, and I say this a lot on various fora. If you're Walmart, you don't want Costco to know that how many invoices you have or how big they are. So one way to do that is to tranche them.
Right.
But there is some conjecture that if you have a baseline proof, we can tokenize, or we can move that proof's ownership to another party within the Shield contract, making it pretty invisible. However, does that really make a market? In other words, does that, so there's this dialectic, right? This balance point. You don't want to have everybody knowing what's going on with you. At the same time, you want to make a market. You want liquidity. So,
well, I think that there are certainly ways around that, using more of the Greeks to characterize things rather than anything specific to a company, and the fact that it's tokenized to some extent shields the actual size of the possible offering, if you will. So there are certainly ways around them, and we do it in the public markets all the time, right? So those are the easier things, I think, to deal with.
And there are a couple of companies that are around this sort of thing and have competencies. One is Consensus with Codify, and another is which I don't know if you call it spun out, but certainly Consensus people went off to help run this thing called Centrifuge, and they have an interesting approach that also involves DeFi. So I was quite interested in that. So that's definitely a thing that needs to be looked into. In order to do that, you need to have you need to be able to baseline an invoice. So we can baseline POs right now. You need to be able to, and in order to baseline an invoice, you need to be able to create new workflow steps, easily create new workflow steps that are dependent on other multiple previous workflow steps. And there's a video online already that will give you some details about this, because we went over it in a technical meeting last week. And this, I know it looks like a dog's breakfast of stuff. But if you look down here, the interesting thing here, right, you've got a PO, then you've got logistics steps, inventory management, and then delivery receipts and other things. And the question is that linear leading up to the invoice, or does the invoice need to only be able to, to be baselined after multiple streams of workflow steps, where the invoice needs to pass muster with all of them? or is it just like with the PO, just one? I think the PO has to be consistent, have continuity with the master service agreement in the current demo. Does the invoice need to be consistent and have continuity with not only the delivery receipt, but other items, other workflow steps? And so that's one thing, you know, we've got a research spike called workflow step cardinality that we'll look into. And again, if you go to the YouTube channel, I think that's already, if it's not out, I'll make sure it's out this week, early tomorrow. And actually it's not on the YouTube channel. We just distributed it to the guys that were working on that. Yeah, so there's lots of work around this issue right now. Can tokenize the baseline invoice, can factor the invoice, can baseline an invoice from these delivery receipts, inventory records, POs, can create and execute a workflow step based on multiple previous steps. And then how to manage those assets that are baselined stealthily. Also need a market, you need liquidity, discoverability, or what's the point? What's the point if you don't have those? So how do you get discoverability, liquidity, and stealthiness at the same time in the right mix? That's the interesting question. And yeah, Codify, Centrifuge, Maker all have things to say about that. So that's this project. Given that we don't have a ton of people, given it's Memorial Day, I'll take the liberty of proposing that this is the next big sparkler. Does anyone, and I don't think we have, I think we'll also go offline and I'll follow up with an email to confirm, but this would be a good place for discussion. Noam, I know you have a point of view about this. Stephen?
I'm good with it. I mean, it's lofty enough.
Yeah.
The discovery aspect of this is the component that I think needs a lot of thought. There's a marketplace without clear discovery aspects that surface what's going on to the participants becomes a morass.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So make sure I've got that in there. I think, unfortunately, a lot of that's going to come down to the asset management function on the other side of it, right? So if it's Codify or some other service provider, right?
Hey, John, this is a basic question. I probably should know the answer. Are these invoices secured or unsecured? Are they secured by the actual deliverables?
That's my understanding. I'm not the expert on that. But yeah, I believe so, right? I mean, the whole point is that.
I don't know.
Centrifuge has a whole page on it if you go to their website. Can create a marketplace that doesn't give away the business information, can discover invoices to purchase without these invoices telegraphing company info, issuing company info, right? Et cetera. Really, the first thing we need to do in that is to get some work done on workflow steps, making those easier to generate, and be able to baseline the invoice token to begin with, right? Or the invoice baseline proof. So, I mean, nothing works until we have that. So that's the first project. So basically new workflow step, invoice. And then once that's done, here's how you tokenize the invoice. I think, so I think very likely that's going to be, in fact, let's just say that unless somebody on email later this week, let's call it no later than Thursday, comes up with a good argument against, that would be the big milestones, right? New workflow step, invoice, and ability to then hand that off to a asset management service in a way that maintains that baselining stealthiness. Right. Okay. More stuff. So can rebase a record. So debasing and rebasing can set which counterparty can change a baseline record without debasing. So debasing is where somebody goes in and probably with admin access to their database and changes a record without the others establishing consistency on that record again. And there are a variety of ways that could happen. We can call that debasing. Baseline, so you have a baseline record and now you've debased it, and in some cases you're going to want to rebase it. So those are some other, I think, arguably more advanced topics than where we're at today, but it's something that people should be thinking about. And given that this is again going on YouTube, it's a good place to, hopefully a lot of people will be, seeing what we're prioritizing, what we're looking at, and maybe somebody with a point of view about these issues will get behind them. And just pausing, Brantley. I think you've got something coming up here. And in fact, Brantley, you might want to propose something around ENS.
What are you thinking?
Well, let's get to so tracking identity of suppliers and the general issue of having a way of, so I want to be very careful about saying this, where baseline doesn't have a point of view about like person identity, right? That presumably is happening inside a respective company's LDAP or access data or Active Directory. Right. So that the notion of tracking people's identity is not a thing in baselining. However, if you're going to baseline with another company, you better know that that's the company, right? Because you're sharing with that company, you're piping information to that company that is private to you and your counterparties.
Yeah, I guess identity is one way of thinking about it. I guess I think of it as a user interface / security. You're kind of implying this here at the end, a security measure, where it's much easier to verify, okay, I typed in, company.eth than it is to always check the hash. So meaning like, it's not just for people or even necessarily organizations, but it's naming addresses, right? And that address could be a contract address, it could be something representing a company, a person, it could be anything.
So can add your company to a baseline compliant phone book where counterparties can discover you and add you to a work group with confidence that they are working, that they are adding you. Right?
Okay, yeah, so it's funny. I was just talking to somebody about this. What you're describing are like verified names, right? So I think this would be helpful for baseline. So I'm glad you brought this up. The idea would be that, so basic ENS just has names and records, and anybody can have any, it's kind of whatever people want. But it would be useful just in general, but particularly for baseline, if we had some sort of process by which, if people wanted to, they could kind of be verified by an organization that could then put them on a list and say, yes, we know that Microsoft.eth is owned by Microsoft or something like that, right? Another wrinkle in all of this is that we are integrating the DNS namespace onto ENS. And we've already done some of this, and we're going to be doing the rest of this very soon, meaning that companies could use their DNS names if they wanted. And that actually might help with identity too, like verifying that you're sending to the right person. Right.
That's quite interesting, right? And I think a lot of people have some focus on this. So this would be a real opportunity, Brantley, to raise a flag, get an issue on, and we could do this after the call. Get something up on the roadmap around this. So here are, for everybody's benefit, we have deployment and ops, documentation, POCs and demos, specifications, marketing and comms. These are all the things that, this is how we keep track of whether or not, and as we improve this and as we get really good with the connection between engineering and the road mapping, we should be able to pretty consistently go into something and know that, you know, where we're at with that, how many of the issues have been done, and drill down, right? So tools, security, integrations, et cetera. So in one of these projects, we could put up a demo for, you know, what if we did a demo that embodied the notion of how one would do this, at least with the NS. Yep. I know that Karthik, who's on the maintainer group, would be quite interested, I think, in something like that. The baseline org registry contract is in 1820, ERC 1820, and we have committed, at least notionally, to the DID standard. So supporting that.
Okay. I'll just mention here, and then we can move on or maybe discuss this later. The organization I work for, True Names Limited, we probably would not be the ones who'd be doing like the verifying and maintaining the list of the verified names. I think that's just beyond kind of our competency. Our focus is really on the ENS protocol. But I certainly can, kind of come up with the standard and work with people on that, and also provide help on anything that's directly ENS related. And I'm sure we could find some organization that would be better suited for the verifying. John, do you want to just chat briefly right after this meeting? Just stay on, or do you have something you got to run to?
We certainly can talk today. I'm not sure if I've got something right after this. I don't want to check my calendar without on camera. So.
Okay. Well, that's fine. We'll connect. I guess I just wanted you to show me what I could be doing here, but all right. Well,
I just created an epic called ENS as Corp Identifier System, and you can change that to whatever you want.
Yeah, I'd like to also contribute with to this, Brantley. So if you wouldn't mind looping me in, that'd be great.
Yeah, great.
Brantley's not on the repo here yet. So Brantley, I'm gonna email me your GitHub ID if you have.
It's just Brantley Milligan. I think I did. It's just simply Brantley Milligan.
Oh, let me fix that then.
Should be simple. Who was just talking there?
This is Brad from Everest.
Oh yeah. Hey Everest people.
How you doing?
Good.
All right, you're in. Accept that invite. You know the deal. GitHub, man. I wish GitHub was better at that. Nobody ever knows that they've gotten an invite.
All right. I just join. Done.
Hey, there you are. Wow, fast. The magic of client server. All right, so there's that. That's great. I think that was a great, a great discussion on that issue. And so, anything else there?
I think that's all we need for now. Thank you very much, John.
Okay. There's another one. I was just discussing this with Hudson Jameson today. Can use baseline on ETH2. When is and side chains, or on layer 2 as well. Although I think I've got layer 2 in here somewhere else. At some point the question is going to be, when do we migrate? I did a little bit of math this weekend over how many baseline activities can be done, theoretically maxing out, or if baselining was as predominant a thing as, say, Tether is on the current public mainnet, what would that do? How many transactions or how many baseline activities could you be doing? How much gas would be spent? And got some interesting numbers. And obviously that's going to go up with ETH2. The question is when, and when it does, by how much, and how much do we reduce noisy neighbor issues, right? Because a lot of companies want to know that they're not going to be held hostage by a mainnet if another CryptoKitties kind of shows up. And in baselining, we can say, well, it's a very forgiving protocol for that, because it's not like your messages stop. Those are going direct point to point. But if you have a workflow step that relies on a baseline proof being on mainnet before the next workflow step can occur, then depending on the application, you may want something in between. So it's not like the issue of latency goes away. So that's another question, another project. I think, again, not something for today, but for later. Be sure baseline proofs migrate to ETH2. That's another thing. Can look to up a counterparty on a global phone book. There it is. That's the one. So actually, it looks like I've already had that one up. So I'll just get rid of this one. And integrate a work step in one group with a work step in another work group. That's something that people have brought up. And then, of course, we just did the SAP Dynamics event, which was great. Spreadsheets are next. And then baselining a DocuSign contract. Internal company user management. So, imagine having a dashboard that allows the administrator to know who's doing different baseline activities. So even if that person's user ID isn't showing up on the mainnet, which it shouldn't, the administrators in their company can know verifiably who did which activity, right? So if you're in a bank and you've baselined your general ledger in the future, and you've got a debit on your account, and something's wrong, or some shenanigans have occurred, you should be able to know which user did it. Demonstration of a traditional system. I think that was half done. Demonstration of NATs as a messaging layer. Demonstration of Corda flows. A notable person suggested that. Wasn't me. As a message layer. Demonstration of Kafka. And then security. Can be confident that all components using an implementation of baselining comply with company policy and security standards. And can be sure baseline doesn't compromise corporate system security. We had an amazing conversation, Stephen and I, with a former head of the CIA's, former CISO of the CIA. And it was just a wonderful conversation about how to build security into baselining upfront. And Stephen, I wonder if you'd like to say some things about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of what Bob was really focusing on was making sure we had authentication as deep into this process as possible. Folks, whether it be nation states or high security companies that have a concern about where the data is originating, they pretty much like that stuff pretty tight in the stack all the way up into hardware if possible. So it's something to keep in mind as we develop forward.
Are there any projects, Stephen, that you want to see put up in the near future on security?
Yeah, I could think about use cases of what security is mainly tapped for now when we think about things like, I'll say the one that comes to mind, I've been part of these ISACs before, these information sharing groups for say financial services. And I'll give the example of FSISAC when each of the financial companies that we were working with had log data that they wanted to talk about to say, hey, we think we might see some compromise coming in. Here's, why we think that, but wouldn't necessarily be up for sharing the exact data. So there was a lot of arm wringing and twisting to say, hey, give us the data so we can help you make the decision. I'd be curious what Baseline can do for something like that, right? If we can get all these organizations to share data, but not necessarily reveal who they are, it might help with how we deal with incident response, how security analysts are able to dig deeper into data. Think about like what the McAfees of the world and, those folks that collect that information do, but now on a truly global scale. Just think, and that was something that I've been mulling around my head when we first started discussing Baseline, which I was going to bring up to the security folks, when we meet and get a little deeper into that.
That sounds great. Could we ask you to this week to maybe drop some, the stubs of some specific project, the security project here?
Yeah, for sure.
That would be a great way to kick things off, and then let's see if we can rally some folks around it. We have 500 people now involved in this thing. There should be a few that get involved. And by the way, not as just a quick ad, Jimmy Lentz at Duke has a passel of brilliant actual engineering students at Duke that I bet would be really interested to get involved in different kinds of projects.
Absolutely. So I run 2 graduate programs there. One is a master's degree in financial technology, and I have a second one that is we'll start classes this fall, but the actual degree program starts next year, and it's a graduate degree in cybersecurity. So we're one of the few engineering schools in the United States that has both of these. We're only one of 2 in the fintech space, but in the cybersecurity space, it's pretty limited. And so yes, we're always looking for interesting projects to work on, because as John said, it's really hard keeping these kids engaged because they're so freaking smart. It's a little bit scary sometimes, but we're always looking for those kinds of projects that they can get involved in. And I mean, we teach on a very hands-on basis, so I'd love to talk to you more about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, there's just a woeful shortage of information security professionals across the board, globally. When we start talking about blockchain, it's even more so. So definitely welcome all the help we can get.
Just from a marketing perspective as well, I think one of the things, a lot of these demos are really cool, but from if you imagine a CEO or senior management looking at it, I think sometimes it's not as clear where the kind of new revenue or reduced cost is coming from. So almost, if it was possible to have some more direct study, cost benefit analysis showing how beneficial these things are, I think that would go a really long way to helping companies kind of adopt it.
I think that's a very
Charlie,
good point. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just going to jump in there. Actually, that's exactly, oh, by the way, this is Avia. Sorry, I've been kind of quiet throughout this meeting, but thank you for bringing that up. That is a fantastic point. And we're actually putting together a few different slide decks to help address that issue, specifically, giving higher level decision makers an opportunity to see the value and the benefit of what we're doing here. So if you're interested in maybe getting involved with that, please do let me know. Anyone's help is so appreciated.
I love that. I'm so glad you guys have brought this up, this new revenue. I think in a way, we've been doing these low level projects, right? Showing how you can integrate this, showing how you can integrate that. And those are all the parts that you need to see. And I'm surely an IT person in a company would see, the implications, right, of being able to do X and Y. But at the end of the day, fairly soon, certainly before the end of the summer, we should start to see sort of roll up or value proposition projects. And I see that Daniel and Jason are online. They're an integrator company. So as integrators, being able to say, okay, well, we put all these things together. Here's the Dynamics, SAP, Oracle, and DocuSign, and this piece and that piece. And together we create this solution that solves your problem, right? Or creates new revenue, or reduces costs for the company at a higher level. Charlie, is that a good way of paraphrasing what you said?
Yeah, that's exactly it. You know, you need the CEO to be able to look at this and say, oh, we should do this because we're going to save this much money or make this much money. Not look at it and say, oh, like I don't understand what the point of this is. Yeah.
Yeah, and Avia, you're saying that we're already telling that story in the deck that you guys are working on?
Yes, we are actively trying to go that direction. I think it would be very helpful to have more data. So, you know, if anyone on this call has any slide decks that you've made in the past, or possibly some experience with this, that would be so helpful. We're still very much at the beginning of what we're working on, but ultimately that's exactly what we want to build. And we want to have a few different versions. We want to have one for like technical leadership, one for financial leadership. And, you know, we really want to make this clear to everyone from their own angle. So if you guys have anything, please feel free to Slack me and, you know, send over resources. We will absolutely integrate.
I think you're working with Nick Kritikos, right? I mean, he's got like 25 years of experience making that case for big companies.
Yep. We are working together. Actually, in the Slack, we have a channel. It's called the High Level Value Deck. That's where everything is being posted. But yeah, I'm sure you could reach out to Nick or me directly as well.
Okay, cool. All right, next item. I think, all right, with 5 minutes to go, you can see that there's just no shortage of potential projects. What I'm going to propose is that, you know, I'll just write it down for the crowds later on. We've got, you know, one big sparkler is going to be, you know, this, you know, things that will lead to invoices, right? Invoice and invoice management, right? Or asset management, right? So invoices to asset management, that's one big sort of Uber project or overarching project, right? Alongside of that, so I think this is the one we'll kind of like the Dynamics SAP thing, Daniel and Jason, you know, you worked on that. This is, you know, getting to the point where we can do that one is a good unifying thing to kind of tell everybody that's what we're about and see if we can get a lot of people working on that. Agreed? That's the job of this committee. So I want to make sure that we, as I said, we don't have enough people given this more Memorial Day to really, you know, make a strong statement, but we can, I'll follow up with an email with the minutes and with this point and see if there's any dissent. So say we all?
Yeah, and I guess just to add some commentary, John. So it's kind of like an addition onto that SAP D365 demo that we showed, where essentially, you know, you would get the invoice there from the you know, accounts receivable department, something along those lines, right? So it's actually already built into the demo. It's just we're not showing it. So I would be happy to extend that and talk to others and get everyone involved.
Awesome. So yeah, that's the ultimately, yeah, you were adding to the Radish demo, but in an improved way. I should mention that alongside of this is a bunch of engineering stuff that's going on. And I'm still frustrated, not frustrated, but awaiting a point where we have good integration of the engineering tasks, which are happening and you know, are trackable, but they haven't been, again, linked up. So this week is going to be the week that if we don't see that, I'm going to hold a couple of events where we go and snap those Legos together. We'll just do, you know, force function it. So there's engineering tasks that are going on, abstracting the demo into more of a protocol level. There's a big branch called init core where a ton of upgrades to the existing system are being made. And it'll be all much more abstracted, more generalized. So that's all happening on top of this. In order to do invoice management, yeah, we need new workflow step. We need Brantley, what we were talking about before, some form of that. We need that legal demo. And I think that's it. So that's the big sparkler. Aside, and then we said we're going to have 2 or 3 other things. We already know that the spreadsheet demo is already going to be announced next week, it looks like. And then we have EDI is still an issue. So these are things that various groups of people can be working on in order to advance the work. But the big one that we're going to have general focus on is the invoice, getting to an invoice and invoice management. Sound right? Okay, last thing is that we will, Kyle Ellicott on the Slack channel, if you can reach him, he's organizing the event next week. We're also, by the way, having presenting to just a ton of Google employees on Thursday. We'll be explaining baselining to them. There are just a bunch of people signed up to hear about baselining at Google, so good on them. And we'll be working out working on the deck for that. So if you have anything that you want to go into the deck for Google or for next week, in terms of what we're talking about at events, please make sure that you get to Avia or Nick or Kyle. And I want to be sure that you guys know about this. So this is the working agenda for our segment next week. It'll be a fireside chat. Hoping to get some folks locked in for a panel, and also hoping to get some folks talking about some of the projects that we're working on. So if you would like to present at this event, I need to know by the end of the day. And I will send a note out about that. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, John, Stephen, one last thing. We want to make sure we start reaching out to more people in the security space, CISOs in particular, to try to bring them on board. There are issues that we know CISOs have with being part of something like Baseline. I think that if we get security involved as early as possible, we get the best results possible down the road. I've seen many times where security is brought in too late, and it seems like it's the showstopper or the bottleneck, and I'd like to make sure that we avoid that issue with something as grand as Baseline. So please, if you know CISOs, please send them our way, because we'd like to start making sure we get as much input as possible.
Thanks, Stephen. I agree.
Stephen is the idea to write a blog about that, so we can spread that.
Say again, Jeff?
Is it an idea to write a blog about that?
Oh, a blog.
Oh, a blog. Yeah. I mean, I think eventually we'll start putting that out. I mean, right now we're officially forming, the security arm of this, charter and all that, to make sure that we've got, our goals and things that we want to make sure we're aligned with. I'm sure blogs and all that will follow shortly after that, but we're just making sure that we're building the team now.
Awesome. Right. Oh, by the way, I just put in the chat a link to getting hats and stuff like that. Cafepress.com/OasisOpen. And then 1713079, I guess is, you need to put that in there. So yeah, if you want to get anything with the baseline logo on it. TJ Chmielewski created that logo, by the way, just for credit. And I think that is a wrap. We got through the whole agenda. Thanks, everybody.
Nice. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, gents and ladies.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.